What if leadership with horses was never supposed to be about being the boss? Most of us were taught that leadership with horses meant being the boss. Be bigger, be stronger, don't let them win, make sure they know who's in charge. But what if the entire framework is built on a misunderstanding of how horses actually live? In this episode, I'm joined by Kim Hallin of Unbridled LLC once again to talk about dominance, leadership, horse society, and what horses may be trying to teach us about power, safety, community, and control. Kim is the founder of Unbridled LLC, an experiential learning program where she offers in-person retreats, mentoring, online courses, and community experiences with her herd. She is also the author of Horse Wisdom: Life Lessons for Humanity, one of my favorite books, and writes regularly on Substack through My Unbridled Life. Her work explores horse behavior, herd dynamics, co-healing boundaries, and the wisdom horses offer when we stop trying to control them long enough to listen. So let's welcome Kim back to the Thinking Horse and Rider. Welcome, friends and fellow horse fiends. I'm Anna Fox of Equus Enlightened, and this is the Thinking Horse and Rider, the podcast dedicated to training you to become the best possible partner for your horse. Here, we explore the science and soul of horsemanship. We dive into equine behavior, the psychology of partnership, and compassionate training methods that help you become a thinking rider who creates a thinking horse. Because when you understand how your horse's mind works and show up with empathy and presence, everything gets easier and a whole lot more fun. My goal is to keep riding easy and fun for everyone, while helping you deepen your connection, find more flow, and maybe even create your own unicorn along the way. Whether you're working on dressage movements or just trying to understand why your horse did that thing they did, we'll explore the research, the real talk, and the small shifts that make a big difference in and out of the saddle. So grab your boots, take a deep breath. What are you waiting for? Come ride with me. Welcome, Kim. Thank you for joining me again on this episode of The Thinking Horse and Rider. Would you
Glad to
just
be here.
tell all of our new listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure, yeah. Again, Kim Hallin. My business is called Unbridled, and I am in just outside of Charleston, South Carolina. And I guess technically my business would be an experiential learning with horses, essentially. So I do some of that kind of work on the farm in person with people and my small herd of horses. But I also do um, mentoring, coaching, online courses, online membership communities, and all of it is really about what unbridled means is disentangling ourselves from basically all of the domesticated beliefs and systems, sort of all the stuff we've been conditioned to believe and to deal with in the domesticated world that we humans deal with, but actually our horses also are dealing with it. And I teach a lot from the parallels in those two scenarios, um, what horses can help us see about ourselves and the other way around. The more we understand our own predicament, the more we can understand the horse's predicament. And then how do we together work on um, I don't really like the word healing, although I use it sometimes, but how do we find our way forward in the most mutually beneficial way possible, given this the world that we live in. So yeah, that's what my business is about.
I love that because I think the worlds parallel so much,
Yeah.
and people just don't realize how what we do to horses, we do to ourselves, or vice versa, right? I guess it's a chicken or the egg conversation,
Yep.
but the worlds parallel so much, and we do just need to find a way to move forward in a happier and healthier way
Mhm.
than history. Traditions are great for some things, but for other things, we can let it be history and let the future be better.
Let the
right?
future be better, yes. And then there's also an aspect of it. I think you and I might have talked about this before in one of our many conversations, but horses, like a lot of nature, but horses have been around for what, 55 million years longer than we have. And there might be some wisdom there and in the natural world. So I look a lot to that we are really an infant species. And I think we are still evolving and learning. And some of the things we have created, we can't just dismiss them, right? That they're the world that we've created that we are living in. And in our lifetime, we are going to continue living in it. But there's also this idea that there may be some things we might like to try to shift slowly for the future so that future generations may not, be living in some of the same, I don't even want to call them mistakes. I think it's all a learning process, but
Right.
maybe we're evolving too, I guess is what I'm saying. And we may evolve in our evolution. We may realize that some things from nature and from way past are still useful to us.
I think if we realize how much of an infant species humans are,
Yeah.
we think that we are far superior because we have all of these things. And I was actually listening to a podcast the other day, and the guy was talking about how the basic differentiation between humans and the rest of the species is that we have figured out how to harness the power of fire. This was a circadian rhythm sort of discussion. And so talking about how we then started staying up later and talking about things because you could sit around the fire and do that.
Mm.
But then, of course, we would be more tired in the morning. So how did we adjust to that? It was a really interesting conversation. But again, horses have been around, and all the other animals and species have been around much longer than we have. Just because we have computers, we think we are the superior species. But,
Right. And
right,
we,
we may be losing something in that thought
yeah,
process.
it's kind of like balance, right? I mean, yeah, we have evolved to have some things that other species don't have, including this huge frontal cortex and how we think about things. But I think as a young species, we've been on the journey of like taking that, like, oh, this is what's different about us. Let's take it as far as we can take it. And have in the, like when you exercise one muscle, the other ones start to atrophy. And like I
Mm-hmm.
think we're figuring out
Exactly.
where that road has led us. And maybe we should have take some other things into consideration. And just
Yeah.
because we can do certain things, maybe our species journey is to learn that maybe we don't always need to do it. Yeah.
So, one of my first questions was, where do you think the dominance theory in training horses comes from? Why did we start doing that?
Yeah. That's a really tricky one. I don't know. I don't think any of us know the answer for sure, but I do think it has something to do with this idea of control equals safety. Why do we lean toward dominance? But it is kind of a chicken or egg question. Like I don't know where it actually started. Like when we talk about dominance theory in horses, because that's probably what you were asking it about, it is in something like dog species where there's true dominance and submission. Usually, once the dominant dog establishes itself as dominant, the other dogs don't keep challenging that structure, right? It's like a bully in the schoolyard, right? Everybody avoids the ones who get bullied. Don't keep pestering the bully, asking to get bullied, right? One of the big evidences I heard someone say once, and I was like, that's so brilliant. Why don't we see it that way? We always go, why does that horse keep going over there and keep getting beaten up by this other horse? Keep asking to share the hay. They keep repeating this scenario. And that's proof there that it is not dominance and submission. Because if horses understood submission, they would not keep putting themselves in the position to get kicked again, to get bit again, to get run off again. So that's kind of the clue almost isn't like we're so focused on the behavior that looks like dominance, we're not paying attention to dominance hierarchies require submission as well. And those hierarchies can change a lot within horse herds, right? And can shuffle around based on situations or the loss of one member, even if it's not the dominant one, right? Or the one that's at the highest in the resource guarding hierarchy.
Well, I think a lot of times that the reason that we have that dominance theory is because of what we witness in domestic herds of horses.
Right.
And, that resource guarding is not something that you see in wild groups of horses.
Not nearly as much. Yeah.
Right. So it's very interesting. I was able to grow up wild horses and then questioning what people were telling me because that's not what I was seeing when I was out on the beach watching these groups of horses. And that part of coming back for more, that has always made me think of cats.
Mm.
Because cats will do that, right?
Mm.
And I have not studied it very much, but from what I have listened to and read, cats have a different structure than, say, dog, wolf, herd, like things like that, right? It's a
Yeah.
different structure. And there are even cats that are solo that
Yep.
do not live in a group. So it's really interesting conversation. The key is that every species is unique.
Absolutely. And I think each community within a species, different in wild horses, different herd management areas have different behaviors. How many predators are there? How do you maintain safety in this environment versus that environment? They're quite more adaptable than we give them credit for.
Yes. And every individual in that group is also unique,
Yes.
just like us. And if they weren't so adaptable, we wouldn't be able to keep them in this domestic setting. They would perish, right? So it's really interesting that people want to get into this cookie cutter. Well, you have to be the boss, you have to not let them win, especially when horses don't necessarily understand that language. Because, like you said, they'll come back and test the waters again.
You can take what you think is a dominant horse and then we humans can dominate them. I'm sorry if that's truly a horse that
Right.
a being that understands dominance and it weighs 1,000 pounds and we weigh 100, 200, right?
Right.
I'm sorry. Something's not adding up here. I think they know when it's wiser not to fight, and so they will
Hmm.
do what appears to be submission, right, to
Absolutely.
get along to go along.
Yes. Get along to go along.
There's a lot of holes in that theory when you really start to examine it.
So many people are so afraid of those holes and asking the question. I'm a very naturally inquisitive, plus a bit of a contrarian. So, I'm always asking a question, like,
Yeah,
why?
right.
But people get really emotional.
Yeah.
Well, that's not what I was taught, or that's not what, has been being done for 100 years or whatever. Okay, cool. But, we haven't been using computers for 100 years either, but now we are. So, do you want to go back? I mean, it's such an interesting dynamic to me that I don't understand why it's so emotional, I guess.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think sometimes the answer may not always be the same. I do think that there is quite a fair amount of fear. People have, most of us who've been around horses have been hurt at some point by a horse, even if it's just a horse stepping on your foot.
Right. Mhm.
And so I think there's a lot of fear, and that if someone tells you to do things or something has worked to keep you safe, even though that may have not been necessary or may have not been the only way to, address that
Right.
situation, but it worked and it helped you feel powerful or safe or whatever in control of the situation. I think there is a lot of fear of people getting hurt, of their horse getting hurt, or them they mess up their horse. There's a lot of fear.
There's a lot of fear. I am learning now what I don't think I noticed. I think it was there. I just don't think I noticed it when I was younger and I was not doing horses full time. Well, even when I was doing horses full time as a younger person, I was I wasn't training people full time. I was working with horses full time.
Which is different.
It is totally different. So when you start working with people, most how much fear there is out there and how many, especially women, they do this anyway. They are scared. One of my people told me, like, every time I get on, I think it might be the day that I die.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what?
Well, that's serious fear, right? To be
Right,
living with.
that, and you do it anyway. So it's such an interesting
It is.
balance, right? Now that I know that, we were able to work through a whole lot of it and change the way that she felt about it
Mhm.
and change the way she sees the horses. And but the number of people that I'm finding that are like that is just, it's amazing to me.
And you hit the nail on the head about once we can name it and acknowledge what it is. Because I actually can relate completely to that. After I had a really horrific fall in college where I broke my
Mhm.
neck, traumatic in many ways. And nobody at that time in my life really debriefed me about what had occurred, the whys. I had my stories, right? All the self judgment about the why. And then when I was ready to get back on a horse, which everybody said, get back on a horse as soon as you can, because of the fear, right? There's a lot of pressure to do that. And then when I did it, there was a lot of praise for how brave I was and for doing it. But I had a period of my life where literally I went from having joy with riding to I just wanted it to be over so I knew I survived. I literally would be riding and being like, I just want to make it to the end of this lesson. And then
Hmm.
that's when the relief felt to me was like I finished the ride and I lived, right? So I do relate to, I mean, I've experienced that. And if anyone in my life at that time had been like you, someone who could have helped me even just speak it out loud and then talk about it and work through that. But that's not the way in the horse industry. The culture generally has led us to become those people who just push through those fears, right?
I went through brief periods like that myself because, I had some bad falls. I would ride anything as a teenager, as a young adult. And then as a young adult, I also worked at a breeding farm and started basically feral babies who probably hadn't been handled for 3 years. They were turned out and they were just brought in to a barn situation. And we were supposed to, basically get them up and going in 30 days.
Right.
And at the time, I thought it was a little crazy, but I didn't realize how crazy it was. And definitely had some life-altering moments doing that. I think what saved me was I had really good friends
Mm,
who worked with me who also experienced sort of the same things. And
yeah.
we were able to help each other. And then I do think getting into my job in public safety was helpful because then I started researching fear and trauma and the things that affected us in that world and taking classes. It helped me to see it. So now, instead of having that mindset, because I grew up with the same thing, right? You fall off, you get back on. I
Right.
remember one time I don't know, I was young, 10, yeah, not more than 11 for sure. And I fell off a horse. My instructor at the time basically threw me back on. I was a little kid. I'm only 4'11" now, right? So I was a little kid. Okay.
Yeah.
And it was a big horse for me. She throws me back on. I basically am riding one armed because I hurt my other arm. I did not break it, thankfully. And is like, go over that jump again. I had to do it until I got the horse over the jump. Then my mom comes and picks me up, and I don't know if you remember, there used to be like this cold wrap thing that was blue and kind of spongy for the
Yes.
horses, and
Yeah.
she had wrapped my arm in that. And of course, my mom picks me up and she's freaked out, like,
Right.
"Oh my God, why didn't you call me earlier?" She runs me off to the infirmary because my dad was in the Navy at the time. I wasn't broken, but that was just the way it was, and you just didn't question it. But as I work with people who are either new adult riders or they're returning to riding after a hiatus, whatever, those people are older, they're wiser, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
That theory does not work as well with them.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, good, right? But it is, I think, for a lot of riding instructors, a hard. One of my friends told me, she's like, "You're not their therapist." Well, no, but
If we don't deal with all the unspoken stuff that's going on, we're not going to make progress and it's not going to be safe,
exactly. And the
right?
horses feel that contradiction in them.
Totally.
So the horses know what's happening.
And a lot
And
of times, a person who feels afraid, sometimes it can be projection, but sometimes they can be feeding that the horse is having some anxiety. And it's like, let's
right,
not ignore that because that is unsafe.
don't ignore the horse's anxiety
Or yours.
and don't ignore your anxiety either.
It's not a good match,
It's
right?
not a good
It's like
combination.
back to the dominance theory. It's so interesting that it's a self-perpetuating cycle. It's changing, but the instructor was the get back on, suck it up, make that horse do this, do that, right? Like if
Right.
that's the human to human dynamic that we're having there, then of course that's going to be the human to horse dynamic. And then if you believe that showing the horse who his boss is the way, then you're going to want to treat the riders that way so that they can learn how to be the boss, right? So it's this whole
Yeah,
self-perpetuating cycle where both the people and the horses are being treated the same way, honestly.
true. It's another one of those parallels, right?
Yes,
A-
yes.
And I think you're right. I think it is changing. Not terribly quickly though.
Yeah, particularly the way that human students are taught
Right.
riding.
So do you think that our understanding of horses and humans is evolving, or do you just think that we are rebranding control with nicer words?
Oh, I think totally so far we have rebranded control with nicer words because the fundamentals of it, none of it have really changed. I don't know that it really can when ownership and utility, of horses is sort of what the industry is built on. I think what we're better in some ways, right? But I think we're going to keep bumping up on the limits of that because when it push comes to shove, right, we're going to get what we need to out of the horses. There's always going to be that argument that if this horse isn't with me forever, it needs to know how to behave for the next person so it doesn't get mistreated or abused, right? You can't fault the argument because most horses don't spend their whole lives in one home and we don't always have control over where they're going to end up next. And we think the more submissive they are, the more likely they're going to get treated well. So it's a
Yeah.
real dilemma. But I do think we've gotten very, very good at dressing or masquerading control in niceties.
Yeah.
Which in human
Yeah.
world, we're becoming master manipulators.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So in your mind, what's the difference between dominating or being the boss and leading, or is there a difference?
I do think that there's a difference. And the main place that I get any sort of answer from that, and I'm not an expert by any means, but I'll give you my working opinion at the moment, is from watching, because I'm a geek on watching wild horse behavior and
Yeah.
studying ethology. It's wonderful with the internet now, and even on Facebook, there's so many places you can watch trail cams and video. There's just a lot more footage, even if you can't be somewhere where you can watch live horses. There isn't a lot of force in the horse. Horses don't have hands to grab each other with, and they are in the wide open where a horse can run away pretty far. And a female horse or a young horse can land a strategic kick to the teeth, to the face, to the eyes, just as easily as a big stallion can, right? It's much harder for a horse to physically dominate, especially repeatedly. So to gain, I guess, what we might call clout or standing in a herd, it is a lot more about relationships. It's about understanding that with this individual, this is how the relationship works. With this individual, this is how the relationship works. They they don't treat everybody the same. They don't have a hierarchy they can just depend on. I'm the boss. I said so. They really have to earn cooperation if they're going to get it. And
Mhm.
also, there just doesn't seem to be this expectation that others will follow me. They can
Right.
set an example, they can become the kind of being that others gravitate toward or not. There are moments that can look like dominance, but generally, overall, the way that the herds operate is not at all based in dominance.
And what you said about a strategic kick or blow, how do we know if that was really strategic or if it was accidental,
True.
right? My kids can be playing and then one can accidentally punch one in the eye.
You can be in the wrong place
Just
at the wrong time.
exactly. So we don't know. I follow the Corolla Wild Horse Fund because that's where I grew up watching
Mm,
horses before they were even fenced in. It seems so crazy now. Recently, they did have a horse die from a kick like that.
mm,
And I think they do a really great job of explaining how that's not normal. It doesn't happen all the time.
right. It's
It's
rare.
it's rare, right? When you watch these wild horses, first of all, you don't often see.
Serious fighting.
I was taught growing up, oh my God, stallions will fight to the death.
No, usually,
No,
rarely. I don't know if
rarely.
ever
In the wild, they live in
Pax's
stallion bands.
bachelor
Like,
band.
so they're not fighting to the death. Every now and then, aggressive play. But how do we know? Maybe that is part of their maturing process, right? It's just like back in Roman times when kids had to grow up and fight. They had to learn how to fight. That was part of their maturation process. Same thing
Yes.
for these horses. How do we know that somebody doesn't accidentally get stabbed? I'm sure it happened back in Roman times, right?
Yeah.
With
Yes.
humans. So, how do we know it doesn't happen to horses? We're making all these judgments, these assumptions that I don't think we necessarily know are true. I know, like myself, you have the, I would say, luxury of being able to let your horses come and go as much as you can as they please. They're not locked in stalls.
Right.
Um, and I really have noticed a lot of what you said in watching horses in that environment and how the leadership roles can change, how they do not often use force. It's very rare. And I also know that you have an ex-feral horse in your herd. So what do you think, what do you notice, first of all, in your horses now that you didn't before when they were maybe in a more traditional setting? And what do you think your feral horse has brought
Yeah.
to the playing field?
Wow. I mean, yeah, I could talk about this a long time. And when I first started really intentionally like not confining my horses, I never had a barn, but I had them in smaller places and more confined at times because it just was what I was taught.
Yeah, we were taught that that was how we keep them safe. That's how we care for them. That's how we, I don't know. That's just how it's done, right?
Yeah, I used to be where the horses were stalled at feeding time. There was a lot of angry faces and charging walls and like just a lot of
Yeah.
what seemed like aggressive. And I remember the first time someone told me, if there's competition around the food, feed them farther apart with hay. If you have
Hmm.
3 horses, have 4 stations, right? Just make
Hmm.
sure that there's always enough in case nobody feels like sharing in the moment. You just take away this scarcity need of competition, which is very unnatural. In the wild, grass is everywhere, right? We're not competing for who has the grass. So there's just very little food competition in wild or feral horses, very little. If you see competition type behavior, it's typically in those few times when a band stallion's mares are in season. That's usually the time when you'll see stallions behaving if there's any type of aggression or chasing someone off. It's usually when the mares are in season. That's a limited resource. In the wild, sometimes a stallion's mares will only go into season once or twice a year because then he breeds them and then they're pregnant for 11 or 12 months, right? It's not the norm. It's dynamic, so people take video of it and it's what you see, but it is not most of the time.
Right.
The dynamics are. So anyway, the one of the big shifts once the horses were out and I had enough resources, multiple water stations, hay stations, I noticed immediately like all of that sort of competitive behavior just went away. I mean,
Hmm.
one horse might walk toward a hay pile and the other one will go, oh, I'll go over to the other hay pile. But it's very calm. There's not even an ear pin. They realize there's not a scarcity of resources. So that was one of the big things for me from more traditional horse keeping to just keeping the horses out. And boy, yeah, with Shiloh coming in as a horse who lived wild in Nevada until he was 5. So he would have been a young stallion. He would have been young to have had his own band by then, because typically stallions don't earn the right and have the maturity to attract mares of their own who stay with them until they're more like 8 or 9. But he does exhibit a lot of behaviors that, from what I've studied, are band stallion behaviors. So maybe he was in that age where he might have had one or two for a little bit of time. Whether he kept them or not is questionable, but he definitely understands. And this was the biggest shift. My herd had no concept. At the time he came in, I had 2 mares and one gelding, a gelding that was gelded young as a domestic horse and had never had really any interest in the mares. In fact, when the mares went in season, he was like, "Why are y'all stalking me?" He didn't really have any of that kind of instinct or learned behavior in him. And Shiloh came in and understood immediately. He won the mares over very quickly. They chose him. He was very attentive to them, unlike my domestic gelding. He loved the flirting and the whole in season stuff that happens when a new horse comes in. But he was also very amazingly respective. Like the mares were in control of that situation, although he held his boundaries, but he was not dominant in any way. So one of the big things he does do when the mares are in season, he will chase my other gelding around.
Hmm.
And part of the problem with that is I have a small property. So my other gelding cannot really get far enough away that the Mustang feels like it's the adequate distance,
Mm.
right? Because he seems to
Mhm.
have a memory of what is the right amount of don't come around when the mares are in season. So that's the problem of my domestic horse keeping, not a problem between them. My domestic gelding, he didn't really understand why. He doesn't
Mm.
understand. Like, so it was really fascinating to see that, yeah, our domestic horses do not understand how horse
Mm.
society works. He came in and he did, and it was very confusing to him and to them. The mares seemed to fall into the instinctual really quickly, but the other gelding did not.
Mhm.
So that was a big shift.
Yeah, I wonder because your mares have been with you for
Yes.
a long time, one of them since they were born, right? So, and you've had different horses and different herds throughout the years. So maybe they just were more adapted to your other gelding, who's not been with you as long and probably came from a much more confined. Because I see that a lot with horses who I know who have been purposely bred and then kept in confined situations because they need to be sold and then they need to be show horses and they really just do not have that education. It's like children that aren't socialized, right?
Correct. Yes.
And I think it's really interesting the comment about Shiloh being only 5 when he was gelded. My gelding was 4, and he was never wild. He was purposely bred and in that sort of environment, but also still exhibits stallion behavior even at 32 years old. Now, he did get better with other geldings. His bubble, I think, got a little smaller over time.
Yeah.
Um, but it's interesting and also interesting that they don't necessarily have their own band in the wild as a stallion until they're 8 or 9. Yet they're exhibiting this behavior. Maybe that 4 to 8, 9 is sort of like puberty
Yep.
in humans.
Yep.
So there's all these big changes and big emotions and big things happening. And when do people want to start riding them?
Right. Right.
Just food for thought, guys. I
At the
mean,
time period where in the wild they would be learning all, they don't even know how to behave yet, right?
we hear more about it with boys or human boys. You know, that really restricting their play and restricting this adventuresome nature in those pubescent years is not good. It's not healthy for them.
Oh, and especially male horses, and even if they're castrated, I believe there's still some of this,
Oh,
right?
right. They still have the genes.
Yeah, learn about boundaries and communication and negotiation and play and exploration. That's their drive. They, as the band stallion, they have to develop knowledge and skills and wisdom and diplomacy and in so many ways.
Hmm.
And if you're a band stallion who stays, in that position, you not only have to manage the relationship with your mares, you not only have to parent all the young, because the stallion does a lot of that, you also have to
Yes.
have relationships with the neighboring bachelor bands, with other band stallions. Like, how many different social
Mhm.
skills you got to be able to
Yes.
do to be like, this one likes the roughhouse for a while, and then we are cool, right?
Right.
This
Right.
one, like, it's a lot. And so, yeah, um,
Yes. We're always told, right, about the alpha mare. And we think the alpha mare does all of those things, and that is not true.
no.
And then also, when we talk about parenting, the mares are, when they have young foals, food and safety, and the rest of the herd does the rest of the parenting. And that is something that is not done in our current horse society.
Right.
And it's so interesting. I follow this Instagram account, and it's a very famous horse. She's had a foal, and it's very interesting because the foal will often just be off on his own. Like he'll nap without mom. And of course people are kind of like, "Oh my gosh, like I can't believe he leaves his mom like that." And she is turned out with at least one other mare and foal. It's that situation where it's just mares and foals, not other familial members. It's such an interesting dynamic because I have actually had horses that were bred and had foals, and they've grown up in familial groups, and it's so interesting to watch that and
Yes.
how that is such a different life. I had a friend several years ago who had a pony that she was boarding at a place, and this couple separated, and the woman had a few horses, 2 or 3, and just like took them one day, all of them away. And
Mm,
so her horse was left without any companionship.
suddenly.
And she like calls me in a panic, and I was like, "Hold on. I can bring you a pony." And it was one of these ponies that my dad had bred, and she had lived in a familial group. my friend's horse, part of the other problem is that he can be aggressive. But she's, like, of course, afraid if it's a new group, and he was pretty good with this other group, but now if I have to introduce new horses to him,
Right.
and she didn't have a place to move this horse. I mean, it's not like you can't just call up most places and be like, hey, can I bring my horse tomorrow? Not really. So she needed to find um a situation. I was like, I can probably help you out. So I take this pony over there, and her horse is running around beside himself, and the mayor kind of looks at him and is like, dude, there's a bunch of grass, there's a bunch of like
Right.
space. Chill out. Just eat some grass. And she just went on about her business and ignored him. Within about 30 minutes, he was
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Ever. And of course, not every horse has that sort of balanced mindset, but I do believe that part of that is because she's never been in a situation where she was really confined, concerned.
Yeah. She grew
And
up
so
in
she's
a familial herd
right.
environment.
And she's just a steady presence. And it's like, oh, okay. But it was
Well, and
really interesting to see that dynamic and just how quickly she was able to say, it's fine, we're fine. You
yeah.
know,
And I think so. It's really interesting because across the street from me, I have there's a herd that he's not a stallion anymore, but for a number of years he was a stallion, and there were two mares there, and I've watched, and then there are other unrelated horses there, but he ended up there were three in that herd that were his babies, born 3 different years,
mm,
two different mares, but 3 different years. And it was so fascinating to watch all of that. And absolutely, the stallion did a lot of the child rearing, particularly with the boys. Um, moms,
interesting.
moms were just eating and doing their thing, right? Like literally,
Right.
or safety. But the other thing that I was so fascinated with was how the older siblings,
Hmm.
they loved mentoring the babies. And like, I'll stand over him while he sleeps. I like his older brother wanting to do the roles of,
Yeah.
and like, I think they learn very young that they are important and they can contribute to the stability of the herd and they can. So there's just this purposefulness and confidence that they get because they're allowed to play
Yes.
very important roles in the herd, especially with the young, even when they're only
Hmm.
a year or two old, right? So
Yes.
yeah, they're all yeah, it's quite interesting. And yes,
It is.
our model of a mare and a foal or only mares and foals and all the foals are the same age or the same year, like this is not how they develop.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And I think being allowed, that's one of the things that I talk to people about all the time. You have to give your horses some autonomy. You have to teach them that they can do things and that they can be responsible for things. I have ridden so many upper level competitive horses in different disciplines. I'm not just going to call out one because several. And I have gotten on that horse and just walked off and been like, I wouldn't even trot this thing. Why am I riding it? Like, if it can't even pick a direction to go on its own confidently,
Right. They've been micromanaged their whole
right. And I do think that's a thing. They get so micromanaged and they just stop. And this is probably going to sound like a very harsh comparison, but sort of my guilty pleasure is listening to true crime podcasts. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
And it makes me think of the people that have Stockholm syndrome
yeah,
or people that are in abusive relationships that can't get out, which of course I've had lots of experience without working in public safety. From the outside, you're like, I don't understand how people can do that. I would never allow that to happen. Da, 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 da. Da. But it's a whole psychological thing.
yes.
And
And we don't recognize that perhaps our horses also
hmm,
have that. Hey, they do what I
yes,
they
that's
do what I
exactly where I was
like.
going.
Hmm, hmm.
Hmm.
Battered women
Yeah,
do that too, right? Abused children do that too. Yeah.
exactly. Oh my gosh.
I know.
Okay.
I could say that with you, right?
Yeah, I know. I often find myself trying to give people little comparisons, but again, the emotion then comes out. We don't need to have an emotion about it. We don't need to place judgment. We don't need to feel guilty. Just need to recognize it, and
Yeah.
then we can address it and we can fix it. It's just like fear. If you can
Yes.
say what it is and then, ooh, get curious about how do I fix it. Really interesting. I'm listening and reading this book called Unstoppable Mindset. It's written by a Navy SEAL, and he just spoke at a leadership seminar that my husband was at, and I got to meet him. And so I'm listening to this book now, and he was saying the same thing about reaching a hard goal, right? If you just acknowledge it and then you get curious about it,
Yeah.
you can find a solution. There's creativity and curiosity. Can you think of just a 10-minute experiment that the listeners can do, maybe using their power of observation and getting curious about it to see what horses choose, whether it's in, a leadership role or autonomy or a boundary setting. What will sort of drive home the idea that we can be more of a leader than a dominator, and that it's maybe okay to follow your horse's lead at times?
Yeah. So if it's just like a 10-minute exercise, what I would say, and it's best done if it's a group of horses that are used to being together, right? So they're a somewhat bonded group of horses that you could observe for 10 minutes. And in 10 minutes, most of the time it's going to look like nothing's happening. They're eating grass, right? But if you can start to notice and recognize a few things that can mean, and I don't even know, it's shared leadership is what I call it, or cooperation, or alignment and being on the same page, right? So one of the key ways, it was so life-changing for me when I learned this. It's so simple. When horses' spines are aligned, are parallel to each other, whether the horses are close together, far apart in the pasture, it doesn't matter if their spines are aligned, those two horses are having a moment of connection and one aligned with the other. So one was there first. So if you want to say the leader said, we're going to face this way, and then the other aligns to it, right? And is basically saying there's something about your energy right now that I want to be in sync with. I have three right now. I might see all three, or I might see only two. And then also, how long does that last? Do they stay in that position? And then which one folds off first? Just takes a step that way. The alignment gets just a little bit out of, it's not quite parallel anymore. And in 10 minutes, you're probably likely to see a little bit of this, would be my guess. But that, in a situation where there's not a lot of activity happening, would probably be something I would encourage people to look for and to pay attention to. Can you tell which horse started it? Can you tell which horse then changes its mind? And when one horse shifts away from that parallel structure, does the other one move to match it then? Right? And you will see, what I see in my herd is that there's no predictable pattern of who's mirroring who, and they all change roles with it. And some are mirroring, and some are doing I guess the leading. Whether that's even in their mind leadership or not, I don't know. Right?
Right, right. Because we don't know. We like to make these assumptions.
Right.
And can we just sort of be open and curious without making a judgment, like, without telling a story? I
Yes.
love that.
Yeah, just write down what happens and what you notice about their body alignments for 10 minutes, right?
Yes. Yes. And I'm sure you do more of this in your groups.
Yep.
So tell me about your group and your current offerings.
Oh gosh. Well, I have what are called horse-powered retreats are really the main offering I do at my farm because and they're 3 hours. They're like mini retreats. And I have just found when we're really getting in sync with horses and wanting to learn we can learn from horses whether the horses are actively trying to teach us or not, but that's what we do here. We notice and observe. An hour is often just not long enough really to get in the groove of it. And sometimes the first hour is just me answering a lot of questions about natural horse behavior. And then we go in and it's like, how does the behavior change when we come into the pasture? What's all going on? How does it change the dynamics? So that's what mostly the retreats are at my place. It's a lot about horse behavior and it's a lot about how do the relationships evolve without any sort of doing or agenda. There's no tools, no halters or lead ropes or anything. So it's really just noticing ourselves and noticing the horses and what happens. And then my online communities are uh, where I take some video footage of the horses interacting, and we may teach about boundaries, we may teach about relationship, I may just teach about ethology and what's going on, how do horses live in the wild? Because that's not something that most people are able to find information about easily. So I do a lot of teaching around that, and then a lot of, I guess, philosophical conversations about what can we learn from horse society about being better humans and better relationships, that kind of thing. Yeah. So I have online membership communities where we do those sorts of things.
And they are wonderful. And you also have a book called
I
Horse
do.
Wisdom. I
I have
don't
a
know if we've talked about it before when you were on the episode, but that just reminded me that earlier when you were talking about ownership,
yes.
I'm pretty sure the book has a chapter on ownership, doesn't it?
Yep. Oh yeah.
Yes. And ownership is one of those things that just fascinates me about the human condition,
Yes.
especially about, I would say, the American condition more than um, other places. But yeah, so that we could probably do a whole chat about that
Oh, we could totally do a whole chat about that.
because it's such a thing with horse ownership and how we feel about that, how we feel about owning anything, right?
Big topic right now is consent in horses and choice. And you just like I really like to bring it back to in an ownership scenario,
Hmm.
one is a captive. There is no equal balance of power here. Yes, we can create situations where horses have choice, but the menu of options that they get to choose from, we
Hmm.
control it. So it's very different than a being that has free choice to just say, I opt out of this relationship and conversation altogether, right? I don't even want to be here.
Yes. And I liken that a lot of times to raising children
Mm,
because yes, we want to give our children consent in some things at some times. Ooh, I think maybe at some time in history, I think that's definitely changed a little bit, but there probably was a really deep sense of ownership around children. And I think maybe that's lessening now,
yeah,
but we are responsible for the children that we bring into the world or that we choose to be responsible for. So again, they cannot have complete consent because,
they're living in our world.
right, they're living in our world and they don't always have the faculties to have complete consent. And the same thing is true of domestic horses. We have not given them the faculties, they don't have them. That
Yeah,
doesn't mean you need to, abuse them and dominate them but I feel like you don't need to call it something it's not.
100%. And there's so many ethical layers to this, but the
Hmm.
other that's not a great parallel between children and horses is that, at least today, the goal is that the children will learn to eventually, as they get older, we want them to learn how to be autonomous and have consent and
Right.
choice and all the things. We aren't preparing our horses for that. We are not preparing the horses to become
No.
independent. Shiloh, like we're not preparing them to be the horse that Shiloh had to learn how to be in the wild. And that's a fact. And it can also be something that we're sad about or we don't think is right, but it is also a reality. So
A
be able
reality.
to hold all
And
those things together.
yeah. And you can have conflicting feelings about it
And you
and just
want to work for
be
a different world, and that's okay.
right, right. And yeah, it doesn't need to be, we can have conflicting feelings about it and not be emotionally charged by it or triggered, right? We can talk about it.
I wish that we could be talking about it more. I think it could
Right.
be very useful for all of us to acknowledge the complexities that more than one thing can be true at the same time, and that's
Absolutely.
hard,
Hmm.
but it doesn't mean it's impossible for us to navigate it.
Right. Exactly. We can talk our way through it, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
always fun to
Well,
talk with you. Oh my
it
gosh.
is. Thank you very much, Kim. I always enjoy it.
Me too. All right. Thanks, Anna.
All right, horse fiends, thanks for hanging out with us today. If this episode got your gears turning, don't forget to check out Reconnect, Rebuild, and Ride with Heart. The links are in the show notes. It's the program that'll take everything we talked about here and actually help you apply it in real life with your horse. And hey, before you ride off, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a quick rating or review of the show. It helps more riders like you find us and keep these conversations going. All the links you need are waiting in the show notes. Happy riding!